looking at some of the contradictions, quote unquote, in Austin American's two-tiered content strategy. Can you tell us a little bit about this story, Chris? This sounded interesting. Basically, as I understand it, they're moving away from the metered paywall, which is the industry standard, towards free content and then paywalled content.
This came through a letter to readers from the publisher, the editor, Manny Garcia. And he says, starting this week, readers who aren't yet subscribers will no longer be limited on the number of articles they can read in a 30-day period. That's the meter. Now, more than ever before, more people in Austin and Texas will be able to have access to key news and information without limitations, hundreds of stories each month. So I went back to the actual letter to get a bit more context on what Garcia was trying to get at here, because he follows that statement with saying, however, subscribers will continue to be rewarded with our best work, award-winning storytelling, analysis, commentary, and investigations you can't find anywhere else.
Right.
So he's defining now what the premium content for subscribing actually is, because they have been sending out most of their coverages like homeless issues, affordability, growth and development, food and dining, local sports, local politics. These are the kind of community stories that they want to keep or now make free.
Right.
And then just encourage those who want more of their quote unquote long form / investigative content to then be behind that subscription.
This is such a great story. We're always open to changing our opinion. You know, we're not going to be locked into any model. We're not going to be difficult like that and just immovable. Things are changing all the time. Now, I will definitely say that I recommend to publishers the metered paywall for a number of reasons. You look at the top news organizations, New York Times and Wall Street Journal, they're all doing it. To me, it makes sense as a user, I think, to be able to capture casual traffic, but not just have it totally open and unlimited. But this is a really compelling argument for the old model, I guess you could say. It's not a hard paywall, but it's a hard paywall on certain categories and then totally open on other categories. Let's talk about the benefits of something like this. This really could make strategic sense. Tyler, I want to ask you about it because you had a great article a couple of weeks ago about just getting revenue from every article however you can. And there's two approaches to that. You can either monetize with ads by giving it away for free, or you can have the paywall on it, right?
Right.
I thought that was really insightful. And this is essentially, I mean, I don't know if that's what their thinking is behind this change, but it reminds me of that very much. The general purpose content, the stuff that seemingly will be most popular in terms of numbers, it seems like that's what they're putting in front of the paywall. And then the stuff that actually costs the most to produce, and it is kind of the most niche.
I would almost just describe it as having a revenue strategy rather than just trying to have a revenue model. Your whole model shouldn't be subscriptions.
Right.
You should have a strategy over what you can. It's just like a while back, we were talking about those dynamic subscriptions.
Yes.
That would
automatically set it open, right?
Yep. Automatically set it open if enough people were searching for it, because you know it's going to get the traffic.
Right.
Where the ad revenue is going to compensate or surpass what you get from a subscription.
Yeah, that was the context it came up in, which is a really fascinating idea and technology that we should definitely look into. But this is the same principle. It's the idea of creating a revenue strategy that's not all in on any one channel. It's not all reader revenue and it's not all advertising. It's a mix, but the publisher's making the decision on what's free. That other example would be the algorithm, or there'd be some threshold of page views that would do it.
But the publisher can
override that,
get the same data that the algorithm was getting.
That would be a good way to make the decisions on which categories to make free. Kind of counterintuitive from the approach that I have just really embraced, and I think that the industry has embraced, but maybe this works better in some markets. If you really do have the resources to do these in-depth, long-form investigative journalism, it could just be that they're looking at it like this, like we need to cover those additional costs, so that's behind the paywall, and then everything else is less expensive to produce, so let's monetize it with advertising.
Right. I mean, that kind of reminds me of what the Boston Globe was doing, where they had that higher price subscription model, but they flat out at the front said, look, this is to fund our research. This
Right.
is investigative pieces that this money is going towards, which might be a good way to frame it for your readers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to really put your strategy behind that statement, I just think it really lends credibility to it. People understand an investigative piece is different than a police report, which is just pure data and there's not really research involved. And it's just a quick thing. And the investigative stuff is really what journalism is about. That's really what you can't get anywhere else except at the local paper.
I was just going to say, I absolutely agree with what you just said there, as far as the cost to go through the investigative process. But there's a quote right there, the second paragraph from the bottom, that I think kind of sums everything up.
This one? Just
Quality
this one.
Journalism brings value. And, again, we can't forget the image that we project by charging for content and not charging for it, because people tend to think of free as less valuable than something that they're going to pay for. So
definitely touching on the devil's advocate point of view of this article here in the last paragraph.
It's almost like where the headline came from. I didn't see a whole lot of contradictions in this until this last statement, which is, are you devaluing the free content? It's an interesting argument. Maybe there is some of that going on subconsciously, but it's all just relative to the premium content. So maybe it's almost like that elevates the premium content by having something for free on the site. Does that make sense?
Right. And I think even having free content projects an image of community spirit and that sort of thing, which is something that newspapers definitely to do. And people want feel-good stuff. So if you're putting recipes or puzzles or entertainment type things as free content, I don't think that comes across as something cheap. What does devalue your image, I think, is putting that investigative journalism free. That devalues your content overall.
There's a definite psychology you got to think about there. And unfortunately, the newspaper industry just wanted to give everything away for free at first, hoping that the advertising would catch up. But the unintended consequences devalued the content, and it's kind of created this situation where everyone's chasing page views. So we're trying to come back from that and get back on a track where it's more about quality content. You really have a good relationship and you're listening to your audience, and obviously they stay tuned in for you. And which actually brings up a good point for our next article, unless there's any other comments on this one.
I just have one final quote to follow up with what Terry had to say is, Garcia says, our approach here is twofold. We want to support the community by providing unlimited access to need-to-know information in both times of crisis and calm. We hope that by bringing you more access to our journalism, you will see the value of our work and join our growing family of subscribers.
I couldn't agree with that more. There is overlap in the strategy with the metered paywall, because with this, they're hoping to maintain traffic on the free columns. It's interesting because we also get a lot of questions from publishers. For example, a lot of our papers are in like North Dakota. They can get some pretty crazy snowstorms up there, totally knock out mail delivery. They need to be able to quickly give free access to certain categories or even the whole e-edition. So I think every publisher feels this obligation to deliver some free news. I don't know if that's pressure just from their readers, or they just feel like that's part of the role, that they need to give certain information to everyone, but others not. It's interesting because with the metered paywall, Terry, this is a technical question. I don't believe that we can have it so that, or correct me if I'm wrong, if there's a meter on the site, can we have certain categories that even the meter won't be able to access?
I don't see why it wouldn't work. In fact, I would almost recommend it.
The only thing would be you just have to be very clear about what is free, because
like election season, you could have a special election candidate category that's just free no matter what. Pulling it just behind the paywall, would that be the same thing?
I think we could definitely make it for free, because when you mark an article for free access, it just wipes out the paywall rules. But what I'm wondering is there a way to lock down only for subscribers certain articles and then have the meter work on all the other stories?
I also have had recent questions that were asking about that exact scenario you just mentioned.
Really?
So
Today in News Tech, the podcast covering innovation in digital journalism. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and subscribe on YouTube or any of your favorite podcast apps. We'll see you tomorrow.
At our hometown, we help newspapers build WordPress websites, design native apps, and develop digital subscription models. If you are interested in a free prototype of your publication on WordPress, go to ourhometown.com and click the Contact Us button.